Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello and welcome along to Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing how to welcome the empathy economy. Now, this is not something that will happen. It already has arrived. So don't be thinking that you can go and hide from this because it's already here today. Joining me in the studio is Dr Jacqui Taylor. Now, Jackie was recognised as one of the 100 global leaders in 2019. She's also one of the 100 most powerful UK entrepreneurs and was awarded an honorary doctorate of science for her international web science work. Jackie, it's lovely to have you with us on the programme today. A really, really interesting show lined up. Empathy economy. I'm sitting here, look, I've all gone blank. My face is just, doesn't know what you're talking. Empathy economy, what do you mean by that?
So this is something where I think we're all aware that technology plays an ever-increasing role in our lives. But maybe we're not aware that the technology changes we've seen so far with digital technology, which possibly is a phrase most people know, actually has been replaced by something that is the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things actually is a technology working in a devolved or a distributed way, as opposed to something that you physically connect. You're connecting to it, but then what's behind it all isn't the same. And so essentially for us, technology is happening around us, to us even, and it's changing our society. So it's not a technology change, technologists like myself getting retrained, but it's affecting all of our lives.
Well, I was going to say, because it's affecting all our lives, but we don't seem to be realising it. I mean, for instance, you use the expression the Internet of Things. It's an expression that I have heard, but it's not something that is in the general psyche. And it seems that, are we all, I hesitate at using the phrase, but are we sleepwalking along while this is all happening to us and not actually having any impact on it?
I think we have been, but the difference now is my web science researchers focused on Generation Z, who are 26 to 16 today, and Generation Alpha, who are 15 to 5. And if any of you have children, nephews, nieces, neighbours, children, you're a school teacher, you're coming into contact with those young people, you know they're not sleepwalking their way forward. And so my research has been, how do they bring their talents to bear for us to have a better world? And so all of the technology we build at my company, FlyingBinary, is focused on bringing those talents to the fore. And we call that the empathy economy, because it's the human at the centre of what's happening with the Internet of Things. But some people may not even know what that is.
Well, I was going to say, is there a tangible example that you can give of the Internet of Things where it does directly affect us?
Yeah, so
we're aware of.
Yes. So you may not have one in your home, but I guarantee you'll know somebody who has a voice assistant in their house. You know, the Amazon one, the Apple one, the Google one, but basically a voice assistant where a voice activated. And, you know, young people these days are asking for support on what the weather's going to be like, but also who won the Oscars last night. And so for them, they're interacting with an artificial intelligence piece of software or service, really, an AI service, and they're literally, it's going alongside them as they live their lives. So they're walking hand in hand with the robots. So Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who I work with, to them that's not an issue. That is the way they want to live their lives, and that's the world they want to be. I think for the rest of us, do we actually know how deep that technology already is in our lives? I'm not sure we do.
So things are going to progress, aren't they? Because I suppose when we look at the smart speakers that you're referring to, that is first generation, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But the Internet of Things, though, has been with us for a long, long time. We go back and, I mean, from my old computing days, Java, which is a very old computer language. I think that was written, wasn't it, so that you would have it in your washing machine and in your kitchen. And that was the beginnings, kind of, really, of programs that were written around us for the domestic appliances and the things that we use on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the web itself, I'm an international web scientist, one of Sir Tim Berners-Lee's web scientists, and the web will be 31 years old on the 12th of March 2020. And it was always envisaged that that distributed capability would be us as humans using technology to enable a better life. That's always what Tim built that for. That's what we as web scientists do. And you're right, it's been with us all that time, 31 years. But now we have generations of our young people where they're very comfortable with it. In fact, Generation Alpha, 15 to 5, they've grown up with nothing else. They expect it around them. It's how they live their lives. It holds no fear for them. Whereas for Generation Y, which is the first generation that came onto the web over 30 years ago, then for them that was blending an offline experience with this online thing, and then what's moved on to digital, and now what's just moved in without most of the generations other than Gen Z and Gen Alpha being aware of it surrounding them. So if you carry something in your pocket that is connecting to a service online, you're already part of the empathy economy.
What are the dangers of that, do you think?
Well, I think the dangers of it are the whole movement from a technology industry point of view has been into something called Industry 4.0, which is where the machines take over. And that, as a web scientist, is absolutely not the way I see the world and not the work that we do at FlyingBinary. That we see the machines as enablers, we see the machines as something that actually allow us to do hard tasks or tasks at scale, and that the humans make the decision. So I would contrast what I talk about as the empathy economy with somebody that talks about Industry 4.0. And there is a difference in the people in the world that think the outcome is either the robots work for us or we will be overcome by them. And I don't think that's necessary at all. I think that we have to get awakened to the idea that technology is here to enable us, and we negotiate that way forward. And so that's my view, and that's what I call the empathy economy.
Do you not think that, to a certain extent, the way that technology is being marketed to us, that we tend to be very passive to it? We tend to sit back and just use it. We don't really get that particularly involved with it. We're not proactive with it. We use it nearly like a service.
I think that's true of certain social generations. So deliberately our web science research wasn't around the millennials, which the millennials are 36 to 27, well, 37 to 27 now. Whereas they reach out to these services, as you're talking about, they'll consume them, but they're very much a consumer. And as the service changes, they click the I agree, and then off we go. So it's very much a passive, but it's almost an unconscious. I think it's the unconscious element of it that I'm looking to change. Whereas for Generation Z and Gen Alpha, they're not unconscious with any of this. They expect it and they navigate it in a different way.
Let's talk a little bit about deep tech, because I mean that's what I suppose that's where we're going, isn't it? It's getting, and also how it's going to affect both individuals and businesses too, which would be very interesting. So I suppose people will confuse that initially with digital technology, won't they? Because they'll think, oh yes, I understand a bit about digital. I've got my laptop, I understand about all of that. And we're talking about something completely different, aren't we?
We are. So deep tech is a combination of engineering and science, and it's categorised by something that takes a long time to build. It's categorised that the commercial proposition on that usually comes late, but there's something very different about deep tech in that the IP is usually nearly impossible to replicate, and therefore something you can monetize and market for yourselves. So FlyingBinary is a deep tech company. We've been building for 10 years. One of the things that's different about us though is we've taken no investment to do that. So we've actually taken the longer route to do what we do, because the co-founders are both engineers, and for us it's about an inclusion agenda, because we believe this technology works for us. So all of our deep tech services work for us as citizens.
So you're talking deep tech, and I've just listened to what you said. I'm still not certain I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So deep tech, are we talking about software? Are we talking about hardware? Are we talking about coding? What exactly, when you talk about what you do, is it that you're writing specific bits of code that can't be replicated? Is it the utilization of that code for different purposes that can't be replicated? What is it that can't be replicated? What is it you're doing?
So it's the end to end. It's what we call in deep tech the value value chain. So everything that connects you as a human to the end result you're after. So the service that tech is delivering, and it's everything in between, which is largely invisible to you. You don't really care how we've done it, as long as you believe in the values we believe in as a company, as long as it delivers the service you want. Because actually the engineering and the science goes behind it is fundamentally different than digital. And so one of the ways I often illustrate that is, with digital, you put some content online. Usually between 30 seconds and 2 minutes is the consumption pattern of that content. You do it with deep tech, particularly with the web science that we build it with. It's usually between 8 and 10 minutes. Very, very sticky. People engage with it. It's actually more resonant with them because it's got that human element to it.
Is it that people think that they are dealing with humans effectively, that the tech is replicating that human experience?
Well, it's partly that the tech actually understands the distinction between a human experience. So we work in the secret world, but for our commercial applications,
because you'd have to kill me if you tell me anything.
I definitely am not going down that road.
We're dancing here, aren't we?
We are dancing around this one. But of the 27 human emotions, 20 of those human emotions are bedded into our tech. So if what we are trying to communicate to you is something that we need to communicate, there's a shock element to this, something you haven't heard, then the deep tech will have that embedded in the service. If your response to that, which is why it's between 8 and 10 minutes, if your response to that is not what the deep tech expects, it will actually explore that with you. So one of the things that is best way of illustrating it is this video we're recording. You've been kind enough to say that you'll let us have this video at the end of it. We will get our deep tech to ingest it. It will look at everything you've said, it'll look at everything I've said, it'll look at how that resonates across the world, how, which countries might be the ideal place for this video to go. It will translate it into 16 languages, it'll separate the audio and the video, it'll tag it, and it'll put it in what we call our web observatory of how the world thinks, what the world feels. And it does all that just automatically. The whole value chain from you giving me a video, us loading it into our service, does it on its own.
The one thing I want to come back to is the fact that it can't be replicated, because everything it seems in this world can be replicated, be it hardware, software or whatever. It can always be copied, and I am intrigued by the fact that you said that it can't be. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few moments' time. Hope you're enjoying today's program. Jacqui Taylor is my guest for today's edition of Business Connections Live, and we'll be hearing more from her in just a few moments' time. Great to have your company as always here on the program. I hope you're enjoying today's show. Very, very different. Once again, we're looking at the sciences that are out there. You've probably heard of the Internet of Things before, but you probably didn't really get the background to it. And I suppose the way we're going through life at the moment, we just take the technology as it comes these days. I mean, Jacqui was saying to me, you've got maybe an Alexa or something. We've got 3 of them at home, and they are truly listening all the time. I mean, we sometimes play the game and we'll say things to see if they will then start popping up in other search patterns later on, and I'm sure they probably will. But the convenience of it is the thing that allows it to actually come into our lives and allow us to use it. And I think maybe that's the back door to all of our lives and maybe our social order. The back door in is the convenience of using this technology that we're talking about today. More to come from Jacqui in just a few moments' time. Let's go back a week where we were talking more technology with Steve Mills. We were looking at Google and some of the products that Google have recently announced and have launched. Interestingly, I was talking to Jacqui about this, and she said actually many of the products that we're talking about now have been around for quite some time, but what they've actually now been is put them into a marketable package that can be put out to the public to be used, which I thought was really interesting. Great show last week with Steve Mills with the key highlights. Here's Steve from last week's edition of Business Connections Live. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company. My guest on today's show is Steve Mills. He's an international business coach. He's a friend of the program. He's been on a number of times where we've talked about all sorts of things from Facebook through to LinkedIn. Today, we're talking about some of the new features that Google are introducing to you so that you can market more effectively your business to a larger audience, therefore making you more successful.
You can now say to Google, right, my catchment area is a 10-mile radius or a 20-mile radius, or it's the whole of the UK, whatever it happened to be, and you'd like to advertise to people walking into the gyms of your competitors. Google's using Google Maps, its own product, to actually know where people are and then to advertise to those people. So any business that's got a physical location, this is perfect for. Okay, so you can keep advertising to those people, but there's, as you mentioned, there's several other ways of retargeting. So you can say to Google, so I could say to Google, right, anybody who visits my website, so they're interested in me for whatever reason, I want to advertise to those people as well. So this myth about you've got to be number one on Google, you know, there is some truth in that. It is good to be on that first page or, you know, number one on Google, but the bottom line is very few people are just going to click on one website, have a look at it, and then, you know, sign up. So retargeting, as already mentioned, is I can say to Google, show advertising to people who visited my website. So that's been around now for probably best part of a year, and that's a great thing to do. It works on a pay-per-click basis, and if you visit my website and then disappear off, you find my adverts all over the internet. Now, as well as that, there's now something called list remarketing. And what list remarketing means is that you can actually go to Google, you can upload a list of names that you've bought. The great thing about all this is it works on a CPC, cost per click basis. So Google charge when somebody clicks on the advert and goes to their website. That's when people pay. One of the keys, I think, to doing this successfully is making sure that your landing page, when somebody goes and clicks on your advert, goes to a page, does that page convert? Because, you know, you could spend a load of cash driving traffic to a website or a web page that doesn't convert. Why would you want to do that? So my name's Steve Mills. I run a company called Crofton Limited. The key takeaways today are, I'd say number one is to make sure that you're fully aware of the latest modern marketing strategies. I spoke about geofencing. I spoke about list retargeting and buyer behavior. We also spoke about this fantastic opportunity using Bonbon. There were 4 real brand new state-of-the-art marketing strategies that, you know, really you need to know and understand. And I do believe it's very difficult for any business owner to keep up to date with marketing. So I suppose my big message to you today would be to make sure, to the best of your ability, that you do, as a business owner, invest some time in improving your sales and your marketing knowledge. Because if you're going to grow your business, if you're serious about doing so, then you've got to really, you know, take it up a notch or two in terms of your level of knowledge and commitment to sales and marketing. You've got to get more sales ultimately, and the only way to do that is to spend more time learning what to do and to commit more time, effort and money into marketing, but marketing that works. If you want to know more from me, visit my website, which is www.stevemills.co. That's .co.
Last week's programme there was Steve Mills, another great show. And don't forget, if you want to watch the entire programme, you can go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. And if you're thinking to yourself, you know what, this would really work for my organisation, for my business, to get my message out there, to explain something that's happening, maybe to communicate with my customers, maybe you're sending a newsletter out at the moment, why don't you turn your readers into viewers? You can do that by having a show here with us at Business Connections Live. It's dead easy to do. Find out more details. You can drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. businessconnectionslive.com. Better still, you can pick the phone up and talk to either myself or Linda Bazant on 01784 256 777. You can follow our stream of consciousness on Twitter at BCL Business TV. You can watch the programme each and every week on Facebook and leave your comments as well. You can go onto YouTube, you can watch it there. We're on iTunes, but the best place to go, along with LinkedIn, of course, is also to go to our website at www.businessconnectionslive.com. Over 280 odd programs, there's around about 400 hours of great business advice. So if there's something that you're looking for, if there's a piece of information that you need, if you want to hear from one of our experts, there's only one place to go, and that's to that web address that's on the screen right now, businessconnectionslive.com. Well, you're watching Business Connections Live. It's great to have your company as always. My guest today is Dr. Jacqui Taylor, a cyberpreneur and one of 100 global leaders for 2019. We've been talking about the empathy economy. What we haven't done is find out a little bit about you, I suppose. And before we go down the route of why you can't replicate things, who are you? What are you all about then?
So I'm originally an aerospace engineer who, through a quirk of the work that I did to get my degree, actually didn't practice as an aerospace engineer and found myself with a 6-week programme in computing. My managing director of the aerospace company said, I need somebody to investigate this. Anyway, many years later, which is probably about 40 years later, here I still am. Yes. But 10 years ago, I got back into my engineering because essentially Tim Berners-Lee invited 200 of us to help him build out the World Wide Web. And my eyes just lit up because this was my engineering heritage. And actually, I'd done the hard yards in IT, building things like I'm the only technologist to put tech across the entire health service. I'm the architect of the clearing systems at Bank of England. There's lots of other things that I've done at scale. But this was engineering scale. This was engineer for the planet, the future tech that we need. That was my gig. And here I am today.
And here you are. And do you see a convergence of the two, the software and the hardware coming closer and closer together as you've gone on? I mean, if you're an aerospace engineer, I would imagine it's the nuts and bolts of the things, and the software side of things is the theoretical side of making this bit work. Is that convergence coming closer and closer, do you think?
Yes, and it is, and and particularly the glue that we've used in FlyingBinary, which is the web science. This is actually understanding how humanity understands its own truth, to quote Tim Berners-Lee, and how we'll use the web in the future. Now we've got almost over 50% of humanity on the web. How will we use it to make our lives better? How will we change outcomes for people? How will we deliver our talents? How will you deliver your talents on this amazing technology? Never in human history have we ever had anything like the World Wide Web, but we have to navigate that future. We can't be passive towards it, to use your phrase, but we actually can bring our own talents to that mix and serve a community. And so for me, that's what this is all about, and that requires not just the engineering, but it requires the science behind it, the web science behind it too.
Do you think, because of when it was developed initially and the technology that was available at the time, that it's got its own built-in limitations, that we will run out of whatever it is, the capacity of it, the growth of it, the intelligence of it? Will we ever run out, do you think, or will it just evolve around itself?
We will evolve around it, and we will depend less on the social machines, the platforms like Facebook, Twitter and what have you, and we'll build capability that's outside of that, using the web technology, the responder technology that's on the internet itself, and actually evolve around it. And that's because most of what we have today in digital is what we'd call edge technology, effectively connecting you to some technology. Whereas the Internet of Things runs on cloud, and it has what's called endpoint devices. Now, an endpoint device might be that phone you and I are not carrying in the studio. It might be your autonomous vehicle. It might be anything. It might be a building that you happen to manage. It might be the street you're walking on, that your feet on that pavement generates electricity for the building that you're walking to. So it's all those endpoints connected via cloud technology. So that makes it very different from digital.
Is there a worry in your mind's eye? You understand it, but but most people don't. And is there a worry that what's going to happen is that there will become this quantum shift nearly, where most people will just take the service as it is? We were talking earlier on about the smartphones and the Alexas and the like, but they'll use the technology but have no understanding about how it works at all. And in fact, the technology will nearly take a life on of its own.
Well, that's the fear that people use when they describe Industry 4.0, where essentially the robots run us. I don't actually believe that that's our future, and the reason for that is I've been building the technology in my company for 10 years with Generation Z in mind, and their way in which they use this technology, they've never known anything else. They're what we call our web entrepreneurs. They see something they don't like, they solve it. They're comfortable with it, they don't need to be coders, they just form people around an idea and make a change. Generation Alpha, I have people as young as 5 changing the world, really with no reference to anybody. And if you think, well, I've never met anybody like that, I suggest you pick up the UN speech from Greta Thunberg, who's 16, who's changing the world around climate change. And that's what they're like. So I think the reality of it is Gen Z and Gen Alpha, that's not true for, and it is already not true. The rest of us, it's a choice.
But there are issues already that are developing out of this, aren't there? For instance, if you have a group of researchers who are developing something and they're using AI to do that, and at some stage the AI takes a quantum leap and adds to that, who actually has designed or built, or it becomes unpatentable, doesn't it? Because a person hasn't made it. It's a combination of people and artificial intelligence, so it becomes unpatentable.
Well, I think the reality of it is with AI, we train AI on data. I mean, our AI services train on 2 billion data points a day. There's no human could ever oversee that. So that's actually part of that AI service.
So we're losing control, are we, do you think?
Well, it depends on how you look at it, because we will never solve some of the biggest problems at the level of evolution we're at, that the world faces. So we won't be able to rein in climate change if we don't actually understand all the data it relates to. But that will require something like AI to crunch that data, to be able to inform us about, 15 things we might do, which ones might we choose. So it's actually something that's part of a negotiation. And really, I think the thing about deep tech is it's a collaboration future, not a competitive one. So for your company, you're likely, if you're in the digital world, you're competitive. What's my competitor doing? I need to outrun them. In the world of deep tech, that's not a concept, because it's all beyond all of us, but collaboratively we can change that. And I'd say one of the reasons that I can say that confidently is I've just returned from actually doing expert workshops for the G20. The G20 oversee 40% of the world's GDP, and they were looking at how they could move into what's called the industrial Internet of Things, which is just a more a tighter view with some additional capability that most people don't have access to today. But how can economies evolve in the future with the empathy economy, given that we're moving away from digital? And so I can confidently say that those G20 countries that we all know and we're largely part of actually are taking a different view of this future, which is we'll collaborate together, we'll see that future together. The world becomes a globalized marketplace. So as you as a company, are you worried about your competitor, or are you actually seeking the opportunities that are out there in that globalized world?
Let's go all the way back to the question then.
Go on.
That I was going to ask you about 10 minutes or so ago, about the fact that some of it isn't replicable. Is that because we don't understand it enough to replicate it when we see it? And that in its own sense is the reason that it nearly protects itself, so you don't need the likes of patents or anything like that, because once made, nobody really understands how to replicate it.
You need a very, very specific skill set to be able to build it in the first place. And that sort of IT and engineering skill base is very rare. Combine that with web science, which is what my company does, that's unknown. So we know from our client base that we are the only company in the world that can do some of the things that we do. And that's because we put 10 years hard research into that. But it's about, from our point of view, the humanity element. Does technology enable us as a human, as a species, as a society, to be more inclusive? And we believe it does.
If you're not in the tech world, if you're not offering technology as a solution or a product or whatever, does that mean that you're going to be out of this community that we're talking about? Do you have to be in it to be part of it? And there isn't going to be a place for you to be out of it?
Well, that's a really good question, because essentially the best way of finding out whether you're already in it, you may already be in it and not be aware of it too. So if you've got more than 10% of your revenue generated online, you're already part of it. Now, again, maybe that's a passive part of it, not really understanding it. And the next question would be, how can 90% of my revenue follow that? And so the first thing is, are you in it already? And you may well be. And the second thing is, if you do have more than 10% of your revenue coming from online, directly from online services, so not something you're having to market out there, but something that's being consumed while you sleep, then actually you're at risk of one other thing, which is really the thing that I've dedicated the next 2 years of my life to, which is making sure you're doing that in a cyber safe way.
Now, that leads us on to a whole, that opens up a complete different box of tricks, doesn't it? Cyber safe. People tend to go through life and we muck around with antiviruses and things like that, but really, is anybody cyber safe, do you think?
Well, it's a risk. At the end of the day, all you're doing is navigating a risk.
Is that the acceptable risk then of the technology that we're talking about?
Well, I think, no, it's not anymore. So as we... largely at digital, because we were not generating our income online in that way, that was a risk that most people were running for. As we move into the empathy economy, that's not a risk you can just leave to be. So for us as a company, what we've done is we've actually taken that leap first. So in December 2016, we pivoted our company to move exactly into that world. We've had phenomenal success, but we've learned lots of things.
Success in what way?
Success in that we've pivoted our business model where, well, just over 90% of our income comes that way now. So we are fully in the Internet of Things and the empathy economy now. But we've learned a lot of things that along the way that are the pitfalls largely. And so I would say all the way through 2017 up until the middle of 2018 were all the 2 steps forward, 4 steps back type approaches. And so we've packaged all that together. And that's what we believe CyberSafe is.
I know that globally you are talking to businesses and governments around the world, and you're explaining this to them. What is the most common thing you find yourself saying? What were the lessons that you learned that they're applying to countries, and that businesses are applying to the way that they now approach it? What's the most common pieces of advice you give?
I think the thing that shocks people the most is they don't realise that cyber criminals are using their cash, whether you be a government, whether you be a small business, to actually fund drugs trafficking, people's trafficking and terrorism. All the things that we as business owners are not going into the world to do. And on average, there's about 12% of our revenue being used to fund those evils across the world. And so one of the things we've had to do is say, well, what do you not know? And here's a list of things that you need to know. Ultimately, though, you need to understand the risk. And so working with the World Economic Forum, 141 countries, what's the risk? We've quantified that for every business.
What is the biggest risk out there then?
Well, there's 2 sets of risks for me as an entrepreneur. One is that 58% of our small businesses are the ones that the cyber criminals make the most income from. So not countries. It's actually small businesses that fund most cybercrime, not in entire volumes, not in the numbers, but in terms of the amount of businesses that are targeted. It's not the big businesses, it's not the nation states.
So it's pennies from all of them?
Yes. Yes. So taking 1 pence from every 1,000 rather than, 1,000 pence from one. Yeah, that is their mechanism, their modus operandi. And then the second thing is the risk we're running at home. We've already talked about voice assistants. And so it's those 2 risks that I think are the key things that we don't understand. And effectively, I've prepared a giveaway for every business that listens to this, because I think once we're sighted on that, we can look at where that affects our individual business. But then I know that's not enough, because having had that conversations with whether it be the G20, whether it be a particular nation that I'm meeting here on Thursday to have the same conversation, whether it be a small business owner like one I met this morning, the reality of it is, what do I do about it? So it's all very well, I know I'm at risk, I even know where it might happen, but what can I do to prepare for it? And that's not a simple answer. And as the UK has now left the European Union, we have a different trading relationship with the rest of the world. So arguably our businesses are in the best place to find out in the UK, and effectively I'm making my next 2 years future to support those businesses to take what is essentially an opportunity, but in what I call a cyber safe way.
Jacqui, more from Jacqui in just a few moments' time on this edition of Business Connections Live. I did tell Jacqui about the key takeaways we're about to show you, and she just momentarily just rolled her eyes, because it was all around blockchain, and she went, yeah, well, it's not sustainable, or thereabouts. But anyway, we thought that we would introduce you once again to blockchain. If you've probably heard the expression, there's been quite a lot of press about it. People don't really understand what it's all about. We had Troy Norcross. He joined me on the program on the 4th of February 2019, and we were talking about blockchain. He's from Blockchain Rookies, about how blockchain is disrupting business models, ecosystems, and industries. Troy provided detail on some leading use cases in supply chain management and anti-counterfeiting and healthcare as well. It was a good show, actually, and there's a lot of people out there that kind of, they think of blockchain and they think of cryptocurrency and they think of them all in the same breath. And what Troy was very positive about was the fact that he was trying to separate them. One is a platform, the other one is a use for that platform, and things like that. Really good show, actually. If you're still a little bit confused about what blockchain is all about, then here are the key takeaways from that program.
Hi, my name's Troy Norcross. I'm co-founder of Blockchain Rookies. It's been great being on Business Connections Live today. If you're a small business owner and you want to know what is blockchain, think about it simply. It's an Excel sheet with protected cells that's shared with lots of different people. When do you need to think about blockchain? When you have multiple distrusting parties that want to work together. Blockchain is a platform for co-opetition. And if you're looking at ICOs, STOs, or using cryptocurrencies to raise cash, you can do that, but be very clear, to be very careful that you're going to have good treasury services. It's been really great being here, and I hope you've enjoyed my explanation of blockchain.
And it was a really good explanation of blockchain as well. Once again, if you don't understand what blockchain is all about, then watch that program. Whether it's going to be something that's going to be relevant, shall we say, in 5-10 years' time, well, I think Jackie would say probably not. She shrugs her shoulders. maybe not.
It has specific use cases.
Do you think we'll see the development? I mean, there's been a lot of press because it's a very attractive, isn't it, when you hear about blockchain, the mining of it, the cryptocurrency mining, and all that. But of course, that was pushing up the price of all the video cards because that's how they were doing it. And it just seems that that's all just fallen away now because video cards are coming down in price. It doesn't seem to be that popular anymore. It's just buzzwords now, do you think?
I think the thing about distributed ledger technology is that my main concern is the energy usage of it, in terms of how we support the energy use of what it requires and what it takes from the earth. One of our key concerns in terms of sustainability about any of our societies is, do we have the energy in order to do it? Because until we've moved from fossil fuels and moved to something renewable, we currently are destroying the planet, and so ever increasing need for distributed ledger technology to use ever increasing energy. The equivalent of a small country today, that's not sustainable to me.
So that's really why we're kind of waving it goodbye, and the technology is taking a different turning.
It's taking a different turn. I'm not sure we're waving it goodbye entirely. I think the idea that we have...
The principles are probably good.
The principles, yeah. In terms of distributed ledger technology itself, yes, there is still something in that, in my view. The particular currencies, no. The platforms, no. But we haven't found the right mechanism. But even so, saying that, there are some use cases it's performing for today. But the idea of it being a replacement for our financial economy, I doubt it.
She says, one day we'll come back and say, well, I told you so.
Yeah.
There are going to be people out there that are going to be listening to this, and they're going to be probably in very manual industries, or they're going to feel that actually none of this truly applies to them, and they'll hear about the Internet of Things and they will step back and they'll say, that's just nothing to do with me, so therefore I'm going to ignore it, going to bury my head in the sand, and I'm going to carry on regardless. Mm-hmm. What would you say to businesses like that?
I think if you perform a service for any audience of any kind, whether it's something that's a physical service, whether it's an online service, everything is being moved into an Internet of Things world. So if you perform a service and you're looking for customers to reach out to you, these days there's a white noise you have to get through to find your customers. With the Internet of Things, that's not true. But also, often what we don't do well, where we're not using the Internet of Things, is we don't serve the niche audience that wants our particular service. So you don't have to be a local business anymore. You can, of course, but you can serve businesses all over the world, and they can be your niche, because the common thing is they want the products and services you're doing. So if you want to be able to amplify what you're doing, then the Internet of Things is for you. And you still think, well, I'm not really sure, Jackie, why would I? I would say that the return on investment that we've demonstrated as a company, and some of our clients have now done, is a 60 times return on the dollar.
Gosh.
For every dollar put in. You look at any of the growth forecasts since the financial crash. In fact, if you can do 3 times on the dollar, Hollywood will fund a film for you. So if you can do 60 times on the dollar, why would you not? Now, I'm an entrepreneur, and if you're not an entrepreneur, I could see you thinking, well, I don't think I'll bother. But as an entrepreneur, I think, well, I can reach the market that I'm wanting to reach. I actually can delight them with what I do, and I can make up to, at the moment, 60 times on the dollar is the biggest we've had, but this is only just getting started. Why would I not? And it's a little bit like, think of it as a glass half full. What might you do with it, as opposed to a glass half empty? Why might I not?
I suppose the reason that people will ignore it and step away from it is because they will feel that their industry that they're in is not a tech industry, and they won't see the connection between their industry and the technology. It may be very physically orientated, the kind of work that they're carrying out. I mean, if we're looking at manufacture, once again, I can see that with the smart technology. So we're looking at the car industry, the electronics industry, and the tech industry. They all seem to be ideal for this. But it's the shoemaking companies and the bakeries. The ordinary man in the street, the kind of high street suppliers. While I'm not talking about them, but the supermarkets, for instance, it's how it would apply to them.
So for example, I mean, supermarkets is a really easy one. The food miles that our food travels and the sorts of food we're consuming in order to reduce the impact on the planet means we have to somehow know that we're doing that. We need to know where that food came from, and one of the ways we do that is by sensors, IoT sensors. Actually, every time that food moves, we know it because it's sensor to sensor. That's what I called the value chain earlier. Something like shoes is fantastic because we do have parts of the world in the east where they've installed smart pavements, but you need particular shoe leather on the bottom of your shoes in order to activate it to generate energy.
I've never heard of that before. I think that's just amazing.
Also, it might be something like we do have hoverboard technology, so the whole Back to the Future thing's already here, and how we transport ourselves, how we get around, what services we use, what's called multimodal. I'm going to get on a hoverboard, I'm going to transfer to a Eurostar, I'm going to get off the other end, walk on a smart pavement. It's all around us because it's not a tech thing, it's actually a societal thing. So unless you're just consuming what you produce, and it's just for your family, maybe you've disconnected with the world and you're just growing your own and what have you, then it probably isn't for you. But even then, I would say, what we call our vertical farms, where we're growing food with 15 times the yield, it's actually IoT devices that are helping that happen. Because as the rainfall's reducing, as the soil is getting enriched with natural non-pesticide pollinators and all of that, it means that actually it's IoT that tells you water it today, don't water it tomorrow.
So it's interesting that it is something that society is going to be using. But once again, as we said at the very beginning, we alluded to it, a majority of society will not know that they are using it. And so we will just accept it as life.
Yes.
That is the way things are, and that's the way things will move forward. Do you think then it's important for organisations, for businesses and for countries to start working consciously towards being part of the Internet of Things? And if they do, how do they go about doing that?
Well, that's a very long speech, and I know we've got to do sound bites here. But the reality of it is, it really always, I'm known as the Smart City Czar. So smart cities are future hubs of our business all across the world. 75% of all of our population on Earth will live in them. And so they have been a fascination for me since 2014, since I did that initial work in the UK government. And actually understanding how we navigate that world, it will be probably for most of us at what I call a hyper-local level. We will bring everything back to being able to be self-sufficient where we are. And so the 2,000-mile food journeys, the fact that we'll have factories that will produce things where we are. We already in the Philippines build houses with 3D printers because of the climate change disasters that they're experiencing. So we will navigate that. I think that we'll get caught up in it. The question is, will we actually transform our businesses to utilise it? Will we take the opportunity from it?
Are you personally excited about it? Is it something that you lie there in bed going, actually, this is utopia, this is going to be fantastic? The world will change, life will change as we know it, and the future really is truly very bright, and it's just going to be wonderful for mankind. Is there that, or do you lie in bed at night and you go, do you know, it's not going to take a lot for this to go wrong?
Well, I think it's on all of us. Like I say, it's a collaboration future. But Generation Z and Generation Alpha, I've devoted my last 10 years of my life to that, mainly because they look at the world in a more collaborative way. They actually look outside of their own sphere. They're quite used to reaching across the world to do something. No fear of anything, absolute confidence in it. And they think about things completely differently. And it's them that excites me. I actually feel the future is safer in their hands because they are challenging the systems and the thinking that we've had for so long and saying, why is it like that? One young entrepreneur who made his first 16 million when I went with him to sign his contracts, the CEO that bought his company said, why did you do this? And both his mum and I thought, oh dear, this is not going to go well. And he said, why did I do this? I should be in school. I had to do this because you didn't do this. And I think that these young people, they're confident that this stuff needs doing. We get our work boots on, we get it done. And so that actually excites me. I love working with them. They're a constant challenge. If you're raising one, I understand that. I raised one. It's been hard. And let's all get together on that one. But the reality of it is they're changing our thinking, and our world is actually navigating towards something that I'm calling the empathy economy.
Listen, more from Jacqui in just a few moments' time when we go into our key takeaways from the programme as well. We're looking forward to that. And I suppose, you know, where do we start? Where do you start as a business owner? We've already kind of said, can you ignore it? Obviously, it's not a case of ignoring it. You may think you're ignoring it, but you're probably living through it. You're probably actually, it's already happening to you. So, more to come from Jacqui in just a few moments' time. You're watching Business Connections Live. Steve Harlan with you here. Great to have your company, as always. By the way, if you're thinking to yourself, I'd love to do something like this, maybe be interviewed, I'd love to come on a program like this, but I don't feel I have the necessary skills to do that. We run a whole series of media training courses for people just like you, where we'll invite you into the studio and we take you to the process of how to be interviewed, how to prepare yourself for the interview, what you should be thinking about, how to get your story out there. You've probably noticed from Jacqui today that she's very good at telling stories. And the other thing that's good about it as well is that she turns stories on their heads. So we're not getting once upon a time, blah, 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 and then the punchline. You get the punchline, you find out what she's talking about, and then she works back with the key things that are important. Now, many people, what they'll do is when they're presented with a camera or a microphone, they will tell a linear story. And they should really be turning their stories on their heads. And that's what we teach you on our media training. If you'd like more information about that, go to our website. You'll find out the media courses. They can be turnkey, they can be bespoke for your organisation, completely customised, so they're relevant to the organisation that you're working in. Or they could be just one-to-one, or they could be for a group of people. There are also great team building events as well. So if you'd like more details, go to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. Or if you want, you can drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com, or if you want to have a chat about it and see whether it's going to work for your organisation, you can always pick the phone up and give us a ring on 01784 256 777. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest today is Jacqui Taylor. She is, I love this, a cyberpreneur. She's one of 100 global leaders for the 2019 as a top 10 global Internet of Things innovator. She doesn't just predict the future, she engineers it using cutting-edge web science research. That is such a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I'm sure when people say that and they're bringing you on stage, the audience are sitting there going, my word, what's this woman all about then? When you look back at your career, what's the one thing, do you think, that makes you go, yeah, I did that, that was great?
I think that for me, this whole journey of web science and this whole empathy economy I've talked about today came from the fact that our son at the age of 8 was struggling in a school system to fit in, and it turned out it was the school system that was wrong, not our son. But that actually brought me to bring some of my research, my IT skills, to support him, and I challenged the entire education system on behalf of our young people, which is how I got into this, and said actually our world needs to change to unlock their talents. They don't need to fit into the boxes that we have all been made to fit into for our Victorian education system. And now I see our young people across the world, and obviously the work we do every day, and I realise the change that they're making, and I think I had a part in that, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of our son, who is very much ploughing that furrow faster and further than his parents ever did. So that's really good to know that you've set him on a journey, but it's his talents that are propelling him forward. And I think it's our young people and all of that. The fact that I've had a hand in bringing what Tim Berners-Lee called fundamental web science, and I said, web science, what's that then? He said, don't worry, we've made it up. But that's what you've been doing. It's like, good to know. I thought I was helping some pupils get through their GCEs and their GCSEs, but it turns out I was creating fundamental web science. Who knew?
Fantastic. The problem to me seems to be that when we step back and we look at the world, there was some... I was reading something about Voyager today because I'm a bit of a sad anorak, and that was in the papers. And I think they're saying now that the last 2 scientists who were there when Voyager took off to travel through to what is now outer space, and it would look back and it looked at this small planet, this small dot that was no bigger than a pixel on the cell that it sent back. But the point there is that all of life is on there, and we're all at different places in life. Mm-hmm. So we're talking here of the Internet of Things, we're talking about web technology, but each country, each individual is at a different place of development.
Yes.
So how do we unify all of that? Or is that the bit that's going to hold us back? The fact that some parts of the world aren't as up to speed, shall we say, as the US is or Europe is, and some parts are a little bit behind, some parts are advanced. How do we unify that approach so that everybody is on the same page?
Well, I think there's a couple of answers to that. We have capabilities that many nations have, which we've used competitively. That has to turn to collaboration. So the work I've just done to expert coach through the G20 to say what the digital economy needs to become for the empathy economy, that's exactly that, where those nations have understood actually this needs to change, and how does it change and what do we do about it? So bringing the empathy economy to be real for 60% of the world's GDP. So that's one answer to it. The other answer is when we do this work as a company in places like any of the African nations, anywhere in Asia, actually they teach us more than we teach them. So I'm currently working with the 8 Latin American countries. I'm learning so much by what they have to do and what they're navigating forward, because they don't have the legacy of where we've got to. They've not been on this journey. They've largely got a blank piece of paper and can start from there with all the knowledge. So actually it's unusual possibly, but we're actually turning everything we've done on its head again and saying, well, what do we learn now we know that?
But this isn't going to create a social divide then, is it? The haves and the have-nots.
Well, I think we already have that social divide. So I would argue that social divide exists now. What it will do, and certainly our web science technology, the deep tech we build, is around inclusion, because in the UK, for example, 13% of our population is offline. Now that might be by challenge, but it's often by choice. They choose not to be part of this world. How do you include them? So a lot of our work is understanding we do this in the Internet of Things, and what about those people that choose not to be connected? We can't leave them behind. And so how do we navigate that? So I would say 80% of the world is the world I've talked about, but there's a 20% of the world where by challenge or choice they're not coming with us. So it's actually about navigating that in a collaborative way, because no one company, no one organisation, no one nation, or even a collection of nations like the G20 has the answer. But from a humanity point of view, we have the answer. And the thing that Tim Berners-Lee founded almost 31 years ago, the web, is the way in which we connect together. And I'd use the current coronavirus as an example for that. Within days, the genome for that virus was online, and scientists have been working on it, and we have stepped our way. It's probably going to be months before we actually have a vaccine, but we within days had the top scientists in the world actually getting that genome known and understood, and then we can start to do vaccines. Without something like the Internet of Things, we'd never have got that, and that would be the way we would commonly approach problems. Now, maybe something like the coronavirus is something that we all need to look at, but why couldn't that be about anything? That just happens to be a global problem, but given that this technology will connect everybody, why could it not be the problem that you and I think about, that somebody in Tasmania and somebody in Indonesia also thinks is a good idea? Why wouldn't we set up a business and be delivering that to our 1 million subscribers in a week's time? Why wouldn't we do that? We could.
When we talk about this, are we talking about the immediate future or long-term future? Look at the way computer technology progress. What's it, double the power every 18 months or thereabouts? Yeah. So where are we with this? Is this similar, that wherever we are today with the Internet of Things, it'll be double the power in a year, double that again in a year later? Is that the way this growth is going to be, and it's nearly unstoppable? It
is unstoppable. We're past the point of no return, because over 50% of the world is already online, so we don't go back from here.
No.
And so that's already unstoppable. I think it's only limited by our imaginations, quite frankly, where it might go. I just think that the thing that AI cannot do, that deep tech cannot do, is be human. Now, there's a debate around that, but I'm not going to get into that today. But largely, the creative element of what makes us human is the bit it can't do. So we get to do the cool stuff while the machines do the hard work. Why wouldn't we do that?
Do you know, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been really insightful. It's been very, very different as well. And it's the day the machines become aware of themselves. That's what we've got to worry about, isn't it?
AGI is some way off.
It is. Yeah. Just checking, thank God for that. And it won't be my problem anyway.
Might not be mine either.
We always ask our guests to give us the key takeaways from today's programme. So if you don't mind summarising what we've talked about over the last hour, that would be fantastic. It's straight down camera number 4 that is over there. Say who you are and where you're from, and then really the airways are all yours for as long as you need. So please be my guest.
Thank you. Hi there, I'm Dr Jacqui Taylor. I'm CEO and co-founder of FlyingBinary, and I'm bringing to you today the knowledge that the empathy economy is a whole new world for our businesses, for us as individuals, for us as nations, for us as organisations. And one of the things that I know that you'll all look at, having heard me speak today, is 10% of my revenue coming from this online world that she's talking about or not? And one of the things, there's a double-edged sword with this. If it is 10% of it, then you're in danger of becoming above the radar for those people that we would call cyber criminals, that would want to use the businesses that we have online in a way to suit their ends. And so if I'm being brutally honest with you, that's what funds people trafficking, drugs trafficking, terrorism. And so I don't want any of you listening to this to go, gung-ho into the future without something that to go with you. So I've created an offering called Cyber Safe Entrepreneurs. That's not yet open yet. But I've also created a giveaway today around the risks I've talked about. Based on the research from the World Economic Forum, it looks at the risks that you have as a business in the countries that you sit in, whether as a small business you're one of the 58% where cyber criminals will target you once your online income is over 10%. I've added something extra in here which we haven't really talked about, which is the risks that your home is at as a result of the Internet of Things, the top 10 risks that are in there. So if you go to wef.jacqui, which is JACQUI.online, so wef.jacqui, JACQUI.online, There's a giveaway there that will encapsulate where this whole thing is in the world today. You can look at that in the context of your business. What entrepreneurs and organisations have used it for, they've used it to reassure their boards. They've used it to pivot in the same way that we've pivoted as a company to take the opportunity that I've talked about. But it'll also, when if you acknowledge that you want to stay informed, when I do launch the Cyber Safe Entrepreneurs membership, so that you can get access to me to ask the really difficult questions, which obviously I may ask my team to answer, then I will let you know when that opens too. Because what I'm after today is not just telling you about the empathy economy, not just explaining the opportunity, but making sure we're doing that in a cyber safe way in order that we build strong economies from strong businesses that effectively disinherit the cyber criminals. So thank you for listening today.
Absolutely fantastic. Also, if you want to get that link, if you go to the show notes page at Business Connections Live, you'll also find a link straight to the site as well. Your personal site, just remind us of that. It is?
I'm a web scientist, so we don't have a website as such.
Of course you don't, because you don't trust the things.
Well, we don't need one really.
No.
Because in the Internet of Things it wouldn't be there. But you can check out the old thing, pre-IoT, at FlyingBinary.com. We will put a site up because we've got lots of people waiting to join on Cyber Safe Entrepreneurs, so we will be putting a site up there. It's not over there today, though.
It's just fantastic. It's been a wonderful show talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. I found it really, really interesting as well. It's the things that you don't consider, isn't it? We're all in business, and we don't consider those things yet. We muck around with the technology all the time. We put wires, we plug things in, and we just expect stuff to work these days as well. But yet, we are now part of a big global community.
We are, and that globalisation is an opportunity for us all, personally and in business. So it's been a delight to speak to you today as well. Thank you for inviting me here.
It's been my pleasure, it really has. Listen, I hope you've enjoyed today's programme, and thank you very much indeed for watching. Future programmes coming up, well, we've got Penny Haslam's going to be on the show in a few weeks' time, we do hope. She's an award-winning inspirational speaker. She's just written a book called A Little Bit Famous. She's going to be on the programme. Warren Knight also, he's another author as well. He's into the whole digital world as well. He's got a new book out. Once again, looking at ways to use digital technology to promote and market your business. That's just a couple of the guests that are coming up, along with Brad Burton, the UK's leading motivational speaker. He's going to be on the programme as well in the near future. But from myself, Steve Highland, and also Jacqui Taylor as well, thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed today's show and found it interesting. But until we do it all again, take care and see you soon. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel.